In today's video, we are talking about the 4 most common mistakes that I see non-designers make and how you can avoid them to give your website the professionalism and polish that it truly does require in order to stand out and look awesome. And so without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. Today is their birthday. This is Luke. This is Leia. They are 1-year-old Labradoodles today, and I love them. They're always here in my office with me, with you, while I'm recording these videos. And so in honor of their birthday today, I actually created a website for this example dedicated to the good old goofy and dorky Labradoodle. They say that dogs are really a reflection of their owners. I'm kind of goofy and kind of dorky, so you know what? It all makes sense. All right, let's go ahead and jump straight into the demo page. I created this page so that we could just look at some examples that illustrate these common mistakes that non-designers make. The very first mistake that we're gonna talk about is white space and breathability of our content. So if we look at this page, we can see how close this content is writing to this content below, here, 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 and here. While the intention might be to compress everything up so a visitor doesn't have to scroll so far, scrolling is a very frictionless action that we're all used to taking. It's much more important to create that breathability, which equals readability, so that our content has the opportunity to really jump out at our visitors' eyeballs so that they can actually find what it is that they're trying to learn about our product or services. As an example, let's go ahead and take a look at this page with adding a little bit of that white space. As you can see, it just really gives the page a little bit lighter and cleaner feel. So absolutely think about how you can create those equal amounts of spacing above and below your content blocks to just make everything a little bit easier on the eyeballs of your visitors. Common mistake number 2, and that is not grouping content that belongs together. So if we go ahead and take a look at this page again, we see some content here with these dogs. Now, obviously it's a little confusing how close this block is to this photo and or this block to this photo. It almost makes me wonder, okay, is this talking about this dog or what's going on here? So one thing that we want to do is we want to make it crystal clear what content block belongs with what visual aid or other content on the page. And so if we were to say align these center so that this aligned nice and horizontally centered with this one and this aligned nice and horizontally centered with this one, that would look a lot better. Another opportunity that we have is with background colors, and a background color to group content can go a long way. And so if we look at this block here, which belongs together because we're talking about the characteristics, and then we have some icons here, while the spacing does provide a little bit of that clarity that that group belongs together, a slight background color can make all the difference in the world. So let's go ahead and take a look at this page with some of those changes. So now this actually looks a lot better with this. This actually looks a lot better with this. And now we have this nice row with the background color, which brings these 2 rows and columns together. So far, we're actually looking pretty darn good. Now let's talk about the third non-designer mistake that I always see, and this one I see a lot, and there's actually a few of them, and they're related to typography and making sure that there's no type mistakes as it relates to the type, the hierarchy of your type. And by that I mean, as we scroll up and down this page, we can see this headline right here is at this smaller size, and then suddenly we go to a larger size, which can create a little bit of a confusion in terms of why some text or headlines have a priority over others, especially those that are in the same content group. So in this case, we would want to make sure that these had equal weight so that we're not unintentionally drawing a visitor's eyes to this instead of this. We want to make sure that we're drawing our visitors' eyes very intentionally to the content we want them to read. Another most common mistake that I see has to do with what are called orphans and orphan text. And that is when one single word drops on its own line below. Now, sometimes this can be hard to avoid, especially on mobile devices when the screen is responsive, but for all intents and purposes, we want to eliminate this by either changing the size of the column that it's in or by just editing the text. And so we see that here, and we see that here. Now there's one more thing on this page related to typography, and that has to do with centered content blocks that are large. And so right here under characteristics, we see this really large block of text that's centered and quite wide. Generally speaking, whenever you have centered text, you only want to keep it a sentence or two max. And to the best of your ability, you want to keep longer lines narrow as possible, even if it runs on an additional line. Our eyes have a really hard time reading when the line gets too long. We naturally just want to jump to the next line. And so in this case, we might go ahead and just remove some of that text and or just reduce the width of that column. So let's go ahead and see what those changes look like here in the next tab. So now we have these equally weighted, which looks much better. We removed some text here. We removed that orphan text here, and our page is looking pretty darn good. And now we're going to talk about our fourth most common mistake, and this is probably hands down the most important mistake that you can correct for as soon as you're done watching this video. And that has to do with the visual weight and hierarchy of your calls to action. As we can see on this hero banner right here, which button is our eye drawn to the most? It is the Learn More orange button because it has the most contrast on this page. And so naturally my eye wants to go to that Learn More, whereas the Donate Today button should be the primary call to action. That's what we want the visitor to do most. And so we want to pay special attention to how we're visually weighting our buttons, especially when we have multiple on the page. And so in this case, I would want to switch the colors so that we have much more contrast, and Donate Today is in that orange and the Learn More is in blue, so that we can incentivize someone to know exactly what it is that they should do when they land on this page. The other thing related to buttons has to do with too many styles on the page. As you can see here, we have another Donate Today button that is in a different style. Generally speaking, if there is a call to action that is a primary call to action on the page, you want to do your best to keep that its own color. Now, there are very few exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, if you have a, say, orange call to action at the top, throughout the rest of the page, that same button, that same action should be the same color. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at our page now that we have all of those 4 mistakes corrected. The donate button screams off the page. We got nice white space. This content is really nicely grouped together. Now we have some cool characteristics. And oh, look, there's our orange call to action. Very crystal clear on what the desired action that we want a visitor to take is on the bottom of this page. And that wraps my 4 tips that you can look at your existing web pages today, correct and optimize your conversion rates because you have a super clean, super crispy, and way more polished looking page. If you have any questions or any tips of your own as it relates to design and making even better looking pages, feel free to drop a comment below. And with that, I'm out and I will see you in the next video. See ya.